Welcome to The Point. I'm Marcia Kramer. Today we're getting right to the point with a deadly shooting at a Jewish grocery store in Jersey City. It comes as the rise in anti-Semitic crimes has communities across the tri-state on edge. And in response, New York City launches a new task force to stop the spread of hate. Plus, a new poll has Hillary Clinton leading the 2020 Democratic pack. And I asked former President Bill Clinton, should she run? Our panel will break down all those talking points later. But first, let's get the point of view from New York City's Chief Fiscal Officer, Comptroller Scott Stringer. He's coming up on his 6th year as the city's fiscal watchdog, and he's made no secret that he could run for mayor in 2021. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
So I have to start with this week's shooting in Jersey City. The New Jersey Attorney General Graywall called it an act of domestic terrorism. Your thoughts on that?
Well, this is certainly just a horrific incident, compounded by the fact that we have seen anti-Semitism rise across the world, and here in New York City, these hate crimes are commonplace. And what unites all New Yorkers, both in the Muslim community, the Jewish community, and throughout the city, is that when we are attacked in this way, we all stand up. I praise the mayor for joining with faith leaders. I praise the people who are willing to stand up for others, and that's what we're doing now.
Well, you know, the Jersey City shooting sort of crystallized the rise in anti-Semitism in the metropolitan area. The NYPD says that the number of anti-Semitic incidents year to date has increased by 22%. That's a big number. The mayor had a press conference about this. Let's hear what he had to say.
Sure.
Don't treat the Holocaust like something that could never happen again. Don't treat any horrible acts of hate against any community like they couldn't happen here. History is trying to not just talk to us, it's screaming at us right now.
So I guess the question is this: are we doing enough to deal with anti-Semitism? Is there something else that we could be doing?
Well, there's a lot that we have to do. First and foremost, we need to educate, and we need to unite the city. And I, again, praise the mayor and faith leaders for coming together to make sure that we show a united front. We can't tolerate the angry bigots and haters, and that's why when an incident as tragic as this happens, we also have to stand up. But there's another thing we have to worry about. It's the safety of our children. It's the safety of people just leading their day-to-day lives. I have great faith in the NYPD when it comes to dealing with the terrorism facing the city, but we do have to be vigilant, and we have to talk about it, and we have to acknowledge it. And when people spew hate, whether it's against Jews or any other group, we all have to have a rapid response.
Well, you know, the mayor announced a new task force that's supposed to deal with eradicating hate groups. Do you think it's going to work, and how do you feel about it? Good idea, bad idea?
I haven't been briefed on the specifics of it, but look, I think any opportunity we have to bring people together, to stop hate, to talk about it, and to be very serious as more of these attacks and more of these hate crimes continue, then we should be together at the table.
But you know, the last time the NYPD tried to do something like this was after 9/11, and they tried to infiltrate mosques and things like that, and they came under a lot of criticism from civil liberties groups. I wonder if they'll proceed in the same way, or you think that they'll be cognizant of what happened last time and try to be more sensitive?
Look, I think we can be smart on these issues without infringing on the civil liberties of people, and the surveillance of Muslims was not the smart idea, and we shouldn't think of it in terms of infiltrating innocent people. We should simply target the people who spew that hate. And this is something that must be dealt with in the city. But I do think that when we have had these instances, I have seen elected officials and leaders who never talk to each other during the day drop whatever they're doing and line up to make it clear to anyone who comes to New York City, we will never, ever back down from the notion that we'll protect our people, especially those that are under attack because of what they look like, what their religion is. We just don't tolerate that in the city.
But the rise in hate crimes is not something new. I can tell you, having gone to the monthly crime briefings, that hate crimes have been steadily rising all year. And the question I would have for you is this: has the mayor done enough, or was just one of those things that fell through the cracks when he was trying to run for president?
Look, first of all, let's talk about the president who has ignited hate across the country. Donald Trump has been one of the key conveners of hate groups and white supremacist groups, and we have to combat the President of the United States every day on these issues. Now, can more be done on a policing basis? Of course, we should never be satisfied, especially when you see a rising tide of hate crimes and anti-Semitism. And sure, the mayor has to do more. But when an attack happens, we also have to come together and say enough is enough. We are united. The mayor, the comptroller, and all the leaders, because we have to show a united front.
So you are widely regarded as someone who might run for mayor in 2021. I wonder, if you ran and you won, what would you do differently than the present mayor?
In terms of this issue or a lot of issues?
Every issue.
Well,
the city.
You don't have enough time on this show, but I'll try to break it down for you. Look, I'm a kid who grew up in the 70s, back in the day when there were 2,000 murders a year, and there was Son of Sam. The Bronx really was burning, and we've come a long way since then. But I want to make sure that the pioneers, the people who fought through those tough times, get to stay in the city. And affordability and affordable housing is one of the major issues that's driving people out of New York and into homeless shelters. So we got to deal with affordability. We have to deal with our education system. So there's a lot that whoever the next mayor will be will have to confront: education, affordable housing, climate change, and resiliency.
So how do you build affordable housing?
Well, you do it in a way, you do it in the tradition of the great mayors. LaGuardia built public housing in 1938, started that in 1938, went to Roosevelt, got the money, and started to make it possible for people, immigrants coming to the city, to have that aspirational housing. The Mitchell-Lama program was built after the war in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Middle-class housing came to New York because mayors, governors, and the legislature understood the need. Ed Koch, when we saw the abandonment in the 80s, went and actually built a housing plan that revitalized parts of the Bronx. This mayor made a different deal with very wealthy developers and said, you build affordable housing and I'll give you all the density in our communities. And what turned out was that these developers could not build the housing that we actually needed. They built affordable housing that was unaffordable in all of our communities. So I'm gonna, if I have an opportunity to change that plan, I want to go back to what New York City does well: build real affordable housing in all communities so that we can alleviate the homeless crisis, and at the same time, continue the tradition of making it possible for people to come here and build a life. The entrance fee to the city right now is a $2 million condo, and that doesn't get people to our city, and it doesn't keep people in our city, and that fundamentally has to change.
Instead of talking about the $2 million condo, I'd like to talk about the houses in Queens that had the big sewer break the weekend of Thanksgiving. I know I saw you out there because you were concerned about those people, about 100 families who still have not had their places cleaned up. What can you, as a controller, do to help them? And these are people who just can't afford to get the people in to do the kind of toxic cleanup that they need.
Well, I went out there because I wanted to see for myself just how bad the situation was, and I can tell you that people were actually dealing with raw sewage in their living room. It was a colossal mess. The DEP took blame for this, as they should. We found people who slept in their cars the night before. They didn't have anywhere to go.
Can you get the money to them quicker?
Well, here's what we're doing. So I have the right to allow the city agencies to move quickly on procuring resources to clean the mess up. We supported, I approved those emergency contracts. I went out there myself to see the situation, and our staff has been there every day making sure that people can file accurate claims with the city so they can get reimbursed for their expenses. And it's exactly the job that I'm supposed to do. Get out of the municipal building, get into the streets, find out exactly what's happening, and then put my office to work. They're going to be out there next week as well. So the people of Southeast Queens need that on-the-ground help. I was happy to do it. And by the way, the agencies that I saw out there, they were doing their job as well.
But the 311 problem emerged again as a result of this sewer thing, because what happened was 311 failed these people. Some people didn't get any help for 12 hours, some not at all after they called 311. This has been an ongoing problem of the de Blasio administration. 6 years in, still no solution. Is there a solution?
Look, I have not been shy of my critique of some of the city agencies and the mayoral attention to details. Look, you got to govern the city, and it's not all being on TV shows and traveling around the country. A lot of being mayor is picking up the garbage, making sure that services are being delivered, and when in times of crisis, we have a real response. And every time an agency hasn't performed that way, I've blown the whistle. I've come in and said enough is enough, straighten out your act. We did this with the homeless shelters and the dangerous conditions. We did this with Build It Back when we talked about the resiliency problem after Sandy. And again, this is the checks and balances of government. People say, what does a controller do? And well, I always say we hold everyone accountable. And that's what we did with the sewage issue.
Speaking of holding people accountable, you had an audit this week that talked about the problems at the MTA and the purchase of subway cars built by Bombardier. Maybe you could tell us about it.
Look, many New Yorkers are very aware that our subway system had a near collapse, and we've been trying to fix it for the last many years. As part of that fix, we would do 300 brand new subway cars by this company, Bombardier, and those trains never arrived. They only delivered 18 of them 3 years ago, and they still haven't delivered all those new subway cars. So
and
as
the MTA had to spend a lot of extra money because of that.
$35 million has gone into maintaining these old subway cars. So when people go to the platforms, when they're trying to take their kids to school, when they got to get to work, they're still dealing with an antiquated system because the procurement process or the ability to get these new cars online were not coming because Bombardier would not give out information. They were very hostile to oversight, and that's not acceptable. And the reason I did this audit was to show everybody what is involved to actually make a successful capital plan work. We now have a $51 billion MTA capital plan. It's only going to be successful if there's transparency, oversight, and competence. And that was not the case here. And we're going to continue to call this out. And many people remember when I became controller, we looked at the broken escalators, we looked at the elevators that weren't running on time, and we forced the issue into the public discourse to get action. And that's what we did here.
The Transit Authority President Andy Byford had something to say about that. Let's hear what he had to say.
We have held Bombardier's feet to the fire throughout this project. We have embedded resource to make sure that the trains are being built properly. And critically, we leveraged the liquidated damages which were allowed for as part of the contract. We leveraged that to get us new trains, additional new trains that will benefit New Yorkers.
Are you buying that, Mr. Controller?
Look, the MTA is no hero in this, and I'm not going to give them I cleaned up the mess afterward award. I do respect Andy Byford. I support the Fast Forward plan. I hope that Mr. Byford looks at our audit, that this will inform him about some of the struggles that he will have with companies like Bombardier unless we put language in place and oversight in place so that we don't see this happen. This could have been prevented with better oversight and more accountability.
Let's move on to SOTA, the special one-time assistance program that has been putting homeless people in places, not New York City, many across the river, but also in Westchester, North Carolina, other places. But especially across the river in New Jersey, they've been put in places that are, to say the least, substandard. I wonder if you think at this point that the city should end the program.
Look, I think the city's homeless program has been a colossal failure. We have 60,000 people who are going to sleep in a homeless shelter tonight. 30,000 are children. We went from spending, Marcia, $1.4 billion on maintaining the homeless crisis. We now spend $3.2 billion, and we still have an 11% increase in homelessness. We know that domestic violence survivors are pushing the homeless population upward, yet there's no strategy to deal with our domestic violence survivors. This is a national disgrace, and it is hurting our city, and it's hurting the people within the shelters. I've gone to the shelters, not with any press, just to see for myself the dangerous and disgusting conditions. No human being should live like this in New Jersey, and no human being should have to live like that in our city, the greatest, wealthiest city in the world. And this city still has no policy to really have a comprehensive strategy on homelessness. And I have to tell you, as a New Yorker, I was outraged by another silly announcement that they were deploying 18,000 city employees to find the homeless. It's a wreck.
But is this an admission on the part of the city that its homeless policies and building affordable housing policies have failed? I know you have an idea of how you might find the money to build affordable housing. You may want to change the tax structure.
Look, all ideas have to be on the table. we could create a tax structure to create a revolving fund to build the kind of housing that we need in the tradition of LaGuardia and previous mayors. This deal we have with the developers is not sustainable. I do think we need to be creative. We have 1,100 vacant properties that the city owns in New York City.
So what do you want to do with them?
Well, let's give those properties where we can to build affordable housing. Give it to the nonprofits. Give it to the people who know how to build low-income housing.
Why haven't we done this now?
Because there was a strategy that didn't work. And we have NYCHA looming, the New York City public housing crisis that is getting worse. We have a homeless crisis that's getting worse. It's time for real management. We need to get the adults in the room and come up with policies that are going to solve these problems. Because I will tell you as controller, the good days of unlimited money is slowly ending. I'm not saying we're going to be in a financial crisis this year, but the money is drying up. So we have to save every dollar, and we have to put those dollars to where we can actually see results. Right now, we throw money at a problem, but if it works, it doesn't matter. We just throw more money at the problem, and we have to start solving problems.
Scott Stringer, thank you so much for joining us today. After the break, our panel will discuss the NYPD's new task force and its strategy to end extremism. Stay with us.